Today, we have a heavy-weighted panel with gorgeous panelists, and we're going to talk about the plurality and academic frontiers. We are given 90 minutes, but it may feel long. It's going to be a tight session. We want to leave about 20 minutes for a Q&A. And we want to make this quick and this to be proceeding at a good tempo. So from Glenn and Audrey, we're going to ask them to deliver a keynote-like speech. And then from each panelist, we will ask them to introduce themselves and then give us an overview of what kind of themes that they wish to take up this afternoon. And then, based upon those themes suggested, we would like to ask for comments from each panelist based upon the themes they've chosen. If we could have the name of the panelists on the screen, but I know them by heart, so let me introduce to you the panelists. Kan Suzuki, Professor Kan Suzuki. Give him a big applause. Later on, I will give you, or he will introduce himself, but Professor Kan Suzuki is currently Professor of Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Tokyo and also at the Kinki University Graduate School. But he was a state minister of MEXT, the Education Ministry, but he is also a practitioner in the area of democracy, and therefore I'm looking forward to his conversations with the younger generation in the audience. And then Professor Shigeki Uno. Professor Uno, oh, his name is on there. He's currently Professor, Institute of Social Science, Division of Comparative Contemporary Politics of the University of Tokyo. He is the author, researcher of political philosophy. And Professor Keigo Komamura, or Komamura-san. I'm not supposed to call him professor. He's Professor of Law, Faculty of Law, Keio University. His specialty is Constitution. And Professor Yosuke Yasuda, Professor, Graduate School of Economics at Osaka University. He's an economist, and he specializes in market design. And we have Glenn and Audrey. So the six of us will proceed in this panel discussion. Why did I become engaged in plurality movement? Last year, Funding the Commons event had taken place, and Wired did the planning. And at the Kagaku Miraikan with Audrey and Glenn, we met each other and we became very close. And we forced this sign, plurality. We asked them to do this hand sign, supposed to be meaning plurality, nameraka. Nameraka na shaka and Sonoteki, that's my book. And there are many commonalities between these two books. Have any of you read my book? So, same number of hands raised as plurality, but there are many commonalities, and I'm not going to go into detail. This is a slide I created, but there are several commonalities as indicated. So we concluded that these two books are well aligned, and it leads into Namerakani. And we wanted to spread the movement and concept of plurality in Japan, so we took advantage of this occasion of the publication of the Japanese translation, and I've written the commentary, and in CC0 on the net you can read that free of charge through Wired. So please read my commentary for the Japanese version of Plurality as well. Now I give the floor to Glenn and Audrey. Let's hear from them directly what plurality is all about.
No, I need the slide changer. Yeah, great. I hope this is the right version of the slides. I think it is. Wonderful, amazing, magic. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us here. The only time in my professional career that I've cried on stage was actually at that event that Suzuki Ken-san was just mentioning, and I'm coming close again here too. The resonance between what's going on in Japanese society and this work is so powerful, and it means a tremendous amount to me, which is why I'm thrilled to be here launching this Plurality Week with all of you. I think the basics of the book have already been introduced and many of you have read it, so let me try to give a different, maybe updated to the moment slice on this. I think many of us feel that a moment in history is coming to an end. Maybe it began in 1945 in a joyous way for us in the United States, a painful way for you here in Japan. And it's maybe ending 80 years later in 2025 as we see many of the canonical institutions of the United States leadership in the world unraveling. The role that the United States played in defining freedom and democracy and international trade, and the way that there was a strong connection between technology and progress and the sense of the future. And now these have become a lot of conflicts over trade. They've become an attempt to tear down many of the institutions of international democracy and notion of freedom. And there's a tremendous fear that technology is now a source of division and isolation rather than one of opportunity and progress. And we argue in the book that this end is happening to a large extent because technology and democracy have come into conflict, because the visions that we talk about of the future of technology are in conflict with those underlying values. There's a vision today that you hear from many people in Silicon Valley on the left about technology, AI, doing everything for us, making the world, abundant, and us just sort of enjoying the fruits of that. People like Sam Altman and Reid Hoffman and a lot of the discourse around AI, books like Deep Utopia advocate this. On the other side of the spectrum, you have in the ascendant in the United States right now a vision where technology is about breaking down collective organizations, breaking down solidarity, breaking down unions, and replacing it with sort of an anarcho-capitalism represented by things like Bitcoin, the Sovereign Individual book, Musk, Vance, people like this. And we believe that on the one hand, the threats or the concerns that those pose are real, but it's also a tremendous opportunity. It's an opportunity to move past the calcified versions of democracy that were imposed on so many people as the only way of doing things, and to imagine afresh what a future could be like, a future that we've seen embodied in certain ways in the original internet, in pop culture, like in Star Trek or Epcot, and in practice in the work that Audrey did in Taiwan. So if you don't know about that work, I think many of you do now, it's really a remarkable vision. In Taiwan, a movement called GovZero that Audrey helped launch opened up the government code to the citizens. Citizens improved on it and then pushed the government to adopt it. And Audrey, that was so successful, Audrey became a minister in charge of that importation. And that was the foundation of them having the best performance in the world during the COVID crisis, where citizens designed contract tracing methods, where citizens designed mask allocation methods, and made the country have not just the lowest death rate, but no lockdowns, one of the highest economic growth rates in the world. They built consensus across people from different perspectives, not just when a occupation for 3 weeks took over the National Assembly, but also for years afterwards with a variety of legislation through a system, Polis, rebranded Taiwan in Taiwan, the call-in over there, designed. And they use these things not just to build consensus and pass laws or to deal with a biological infection from across the straits, but also an informational one, infodemic. And their system of community-based fact-checking was combined with the principles of Polis to generate what's now called community notes, which is sweeping the world as the gold standard way of doing fact-checking. And the results of this work speak for themselves. Taiwan is now the highest income per capita country at PPP with more than 10 million people in the world. They have the most digital economy in the world, with the majority of their income coming from the export of digital technology. And while digital technology fuels inequality in most places, in Taiwan they've actually had declining inequality more or less over the last decade. And while democracy declines around the world, Taiwan is now the most respected democracy in Asia, and in many rankings the most respected democracy in the world. And we believe that the foundation of this really lies in the work that we're going to discuss, the philosophies that we're going to discuss. A simple way to put it that comes from Star Trek is infinite diversity and infinite combinations. That's why you'll see us often giving the Vulcan salute. So this is the Vulcan philosophy that all truth, beauty, and progress comes from the union of the unlike, the dissimilar. And this grows out of Hannah Arendt's use of the word plurality to represent the fundamental condition that we are not isolated individuals or a social whole, but rather that both our identities and our society comes from the intersection of diverse social groups. It comes from the philosophy of Danielle Allen, one of our close collaborators, a professor at Harvard, who said that a society should be judged fundamentally on its ability to use the energy that comes from that diversity, not to dissipate it as heat of conflict, but to harness it as the fuel of progress and growth. And finally, the work that Audrey did, represented by these characters, shu wei, which in traditional Mandarin mean both digital and plural. And it's the idea that digital technology is the basis for building the tools for those engines, so that rather than losing the energy of diversity to heat and conflict, we can build it into innovation and growth. And the way that we imagine that collaboration occurring is by improving the trade-off that has always existed between depth and breadth of collaboration. So on this graph, on one axis, you have sort of the richness of our interactions, and on the other, the number of people participating. And the ways in which we interact, from intimacy on the one hand to capitalism on the other, represent a trade-off between that depth and breadth of collaboration. And plurality is about, at every point along the spectrum, pushing back that trade-off so we can more deeply connect with a wider range of people. And I would just want to give 2 examples of that. So on one extreme, there's increasing work on brain-to-brain communication that will allow people to have intimacy that they've never been able to have even in person, by being able to directly experience the internal feelings of being another person. And that allows for both more diversity and for more depth of collaboration, because we can connect to someone in a way we never could, but at the same time, children don't need to give up their imaginations as they grow older in order to communicate with others. They can directly convey what they're feeling to other people. On the other extreme, we can think about a very simple voting method, but that's also an advance in technology, called approval voting. And I guess Yasuda-san will talk about that in a moment. Rather than just voting for one candidate, you can vote for many candidates. So you can approve as many as you want. That leads the candidate who wins to be one that has more consensus, so it builds collaboration. But it also means that you don't have spoiler candidates. by putting another candidate in, you don't mean that someone just loses to the unpopular one just because people divert to that candidate, so that you can have more diversity and more collaboration. But this is a powerful vision. It was developed in many ways in Taiwan, but today more than anywhere, I think Japan is pushing the boundaries of what's possible with the work of future design councils, which are bringing citizens into thinking about long-term planning and envisioning the future, with this broader use of citizens' assemblies here in Japan than anywhere else in the world, with the incredible work that Ano-san, where's Ano-san here? There he is doing in the city of Tokyo. I guess he's moving on from that now, but in his run for governor, and now in his new Mirai party. And in the incredible work that you've been doing culturally, whether it be at MiraiCon, educating people and bringing people into the design of the future in not just learning about science, but participating in building that future, in the work that Team Labs has done in really helping people understand Ken's ideas through artistic experience. I had the honor of going there yesterday. And of course, in the work that Ken Suzuki-san did in both helping people understand and also building technologies to help people experience these types of pluralistic worlds. And this is very much true in business in Japan as well, whether it be sushi tech, Saibos, the way that they are doing collaboration technologies, et cetera. So I firmly believe that Japan is poised in this moment of disruption, not to just be the victim of what's changing in the US, but to inherit a mantle of leadership, to show that there are different ways to do democracy, different ways to do technology, that the American way that is maybe challenging people right now isn't the only possibility, and that if Japan can, after 80 years, move on from the pain of that time, that it has a chance to provide the leadership and to show the world a model of what's possible. Thank you.
I want to take this opportunity to respond to the opening remark of Ito Kohei, the president, because I understand that this is live streamed on YouTube, so maybe he will check the recording about the Yuval Noah Harari paragraph in the Nexus about more Audrey Tang in policy making. I'm actually going to meet with Yuval next week, so I will say this to him in person. Also, when I joined the cabinet, I say that I'm at the Lagrange point between the movement on one side and the government on the other. A Lagrange point is along the two different orbits of two planets or two stars, or as like the moon and the earth, and it feels the gravity equally from both sides, because it's really not bringing all the policymakers to learn Python or something, and it's not to bring all the coders into learning law or constitution or something. It is to keep this very smooth interface between the two, so that it can accurately relay between the two worlds without getting pulled into any particular orbit and captured by that orbit. Because if we do not work on the Lagrange point, it means that both sides feel a sense of indifference, like lack of curiosity. The technologists will think, oh, the policies are just boring, and the policies will think the technologies are just crazy, or something like that. And if you stereotype each other, and there is no room for dialogue, for co-creation, and so on. So I think the spirit that we want to convey here in plurality is that the society have no public enemy, but rather the public enemy is the sense of indifference between the different worlds within a society. And if indifference is our enemy, then difference is our friend. That is my response to Yuval. Thank you.
はい、ありがとうございます。お二人の、
Thank you so much for that. We heard kind of a keynote speech from the two speakers. So reading the book Plurality, I would like to hear responses and reactions from the other speakers, panelists. If we could start with Mr. Shigeki Uno.
Professor Uno has been researching political beliefs and so forth, and mainly in the United States. And the reason why we invited Uno-san is because he authored a book called Jikken no Minshu Experimental Democracy, which is an impressive message. So that is the message we would like to hear from him. Please. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. First, Audrey Tan-san, Gwen Awayo-san, Suzuki Ken-san. I really respect these people, individuals. They are innovators of global democracy. So I'm delighted to be able to share this panel with you. I'm extremely honored and privileged. Thank you very much. So I have been following your work all along with tremendous respect. And this time around, this book, Plurality, carries a special significance for me. The reason why I say this is because, as I was introduced, I have been studying political philosophy as well as political beliefs. These are the topics that I have been interested in. Alexis Tocqueville is a French political philosopher who I'm very much interested in, and also John Dewey, who is a political scientist and educational researcher in the US, and Hannah Arendt. So these are three people are my passion in terms of my research pursuit, and actually all three are featured in this book Plurality, playing very important roles. So maybe I wrote this book. That is my immediate reaction. So if I could elaborate on this a little bit more, on the left-hand side, there is this book, Tocqueville's book. He is a theorist of equality and inequality. So equality is very important according to Tocqueville, but at the same time, he also focused upon the issue of inequality as well. So to overcome this equality and inequality issue, democracy and innovation are important. So that is his view. So he has not only attached importance to equality, but also inequality as well. He heavily discussed this issue. The second book is The Public and Its Problems by John Dewey. This is also a very popular book as well. Well, this book was out of print for a while, so we couldn't read this anymore. But I wanted everyone to read this once again, so I authored a book with my commentary attached to the body of the book. And John Dewey's work has played a very important role in plurality as well. And in the third book, which Suzuki-san kindly introduced, the purpose why I wrote this book is that pragmatism symbolized by Tocqueville and Dewey, I wanted to argue that democracy is all about experiments. That is a topic and a theme that I featured in my book. So I was very surprised because I'm authoring a book right now, and the book that I am about to publish is What is a Politics? So mainly I will be featuring Hannah Arendt. This is such a coincidence, really. And this time around, two of you, your interests and my interests are completely aligned today. So that is a strong impression that I gathered through reading the book. So there are three messages that I have for you today. The first one is a society that allows a diverse experiment is a democratic society. That is the very first point that I want to convey to you. A democracy is not just one consensus of people. It is not just means to realize one form of a consensus. All individuals are engaged in experiments, dedicating their lives, and democratic society should be realized by that. That is what John Dewey said, and that is a message I want to stress to you today. The second message is that fandom is the association of today. This may come as a surprise for you. Tocqueville used this term association. So individuals can freely collaborate with each other, and to that end, association, freedom of association is necessary. But if we have association today, that should be fandom. So you like someone, you like some kind of activity, this sense of liking something. I believe that this could be a greater driving force for all of us in today's world. Over the past many centuries, people were dedicated to organizations and profits. But going forward, the feeling that you like something may be the most important and greater driving force for all of us, or driving connections, because a fandom could be exclusive sometimes. So you are fan of something and then you cannot get along with someone who doesn't share that value with you. But I believe that people who like a democracy can create some kind of a fandom with openness. I believe that this collective group should be a group of fandom. That is my objective as well. And then the third message is that I have been studying Western political beliefs. And what is politics? I believe that it is an art of plurality. Politics is an art of plurality. So it is diverse. People are equal to each other, but they collaborate with each other. And technology to this end is politics. When we see politics today, I believe that we have to restore the politics. Finally, Tan-san and Weil-san, I have a question for two of you. So I was very surprised this time around. Tocqueville, John Dewey, and Hannah Arendt. Why did you pick these three? So I would like to ask this question to both of you, because these three figures actually have some relationship with Keio University. Fukuzawa Yukichi, who founded Keio University, introduced Tocqueville's ideas to Japan, and also pragmatism of John Dewey is something Fukuzawa had a great penchant for. And John Dewey, not only in Japan, but also after 1920s, he was highly appreciated in China. So John Dewey was really a bridging force across the entire Asia, but John Dewey was a forgotten philosopher for a while, but today he was revived in your book in this way, especially as figures Tocqueville, Dewey, and Arendt. All these three were featured in this book, Bridging Asia. So if you could also discuss these three individuals in relation to Asia, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much.
Impressive なディスカッションポイント。
That was, thank you very much for presenting very interesting discussion point.
Sure. Yeah, I'm delighted, and it's wonderful. I fully agree with and I'm really moved by your remarks. And in terms of these thinkers, Dewey is someone who shows up in kind of every conceivable dimension of this work. So he was probably the most influential follower of Henry George, who is one of the original inspirations for our work and had an enormous role in the history of Taiwan. Dewey, and of course, as you mentioned, was very important to Taiwan. So he plays this historical role in Taiwan. He plays this connective role from Henry George. And then he also is really one of the foundational thinkers of this notion of what I would call network democracy. And in fact, we kind of try to argue in the book that Dewey was kind of the visionary founder figure of the internet, of what would become the internet. So Dewey was is a really foundational figure for us. Tocqueville is maybe a little bit less central to our story, but was a much earlier thinker that had a lot of the inspirations that would eventually lead into this work. So he plays a less central role in our work, but is someone we respect a lot. And Arendt, of course, is the originator, one of the first people to use the term plurality. But of course, she's also someone whose ideas have influenced us very much. And there's a very powerful connection, which is that Danielle Allen, who is a very close collaborator, inspiration for much of the work, really one of the central figures in our work, actually wrote the introduction for the latest edition of Human Condition. So anyways, all these things have all these very fascinating connections to each other. And what's so fabulous about meeting you is that we had a very, very strong sense that this stuff was central to Japanese development, but we didn't have a connection. And as some of you may know, Japan is kind of a bit inscrutable for people in the West. It's like hard for us to really know what's going on. I mean, Ken's book is a perfect example. It anticipated our book by a decade, and we'd never heard of it until he invited us to Japan. So, you know, that lack of communication means that there are treasures to be discovered everywhere. And I really hope that through your writing, maybe some of your writing for Western audiences as well, we can tell that story of how these ideas, maybe while they came from Western thinkers in certain ways, actually found the resonance and the impact here. And we can connect up that story and make it a foundation for Japan to have this leadership role that we described. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Audrey, could you make some comments on the relationship between Dewey and Taiwan?
Yes. Certainly. No, I think the idea of education in Taiwan started with this idea of learning by doing as well as experimentation. I was involved in the curriculum design of the new Taiwan curriculum in 2019. That was the first year that we switched from a curriculum that's called the literacy curriculum, where people are asked to consume and understand and maybe critically think of information, toward what's called a competency curriculum, which means that to memorize those standardized answers, maybe we leave it to AI. AI can do that perfectly now with very little hallucination. And so what's useful for a human to do is only in political action in the way that Arendt meant it, and also in a dual sense of a public community action. And so competency is when you produce, and you never produce in isolation. You always produce in the community context to contribute to the episteme by the knowledge, by doing things together. And so in Taiwan, after the 2015 change of curriculum, we see our middle schoolers now in 2022, according to the International Civics and Citizenship Standard Study, ICCS, top of the world when it comes to the ability to contribute civically. So not just civic knowledge, but also ability to contribute to public life. And this is a profoundly Dewey idea. So when we work on the curriculum change, we traced all those lineages all the way back to the education system in early Taiwan education. So I hope that contributes a little bit to your question.
Thank you very much. Both of your comments encourage us so greatly. Thank you very much.
はい、ありがとうございます。それではですね、次。
Okay, so if we could move on. Komamura-san, your turn. Komamura-san is a constitutional lawyer. Or sorry, if you could pass the microphone over to him. As a constitutional scholar, he is very active. He questions sovereignty, and so it's a title of the book, which is very stimulating, and he has been talking and thinking about those aspects throughout the history. So let me pass the microphone over to him. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Komamura, and I teach Constitution at Keio University. I'm a professor of law. My area of expertise is slightly different from other members of the panel. I teach Constitution, and lawyers, judges, prosecutors, I teach them at college. So I'm the only person as an expert of law, and Uno Sensei, Suzuki Sensei, Kan, Audrey, and Glenn. You all see challenges in democracy, but you also find hope in democracy. And as a constitutional lawyer, I detest democracy. I have skepticism towards the democracy, and the Constitution is there to override democracy, and therefore I would like to speak and contribute from that perspective. Now, we are bound by many rules as a professor of law, and therefore I cannot by destiny speak anything interesting or amusing, perhaps. But in this setting today, I want to be as amusing as possible. Politics is already a dead content. We call it oakon in Japanese. I was been thinking how I can make Audrey and Glenn understand oakon.
Dying concept or outdated ideas. それをオワコンと日本では言うんですが、もう
That's what we call oakon in Japanese. And when you get involved in politics, you become unhappy. To become a politician is a penalty game. You have scandals, and you have to respond to unreasonable requests, and there are money that is being given to you, like 100,000 yen to be given as gifts. So no one wants to become a politician these days unless you are an outlier unless you have no regret to your life. I think that's only when you could become a politician. And another point I want to raise is that representative government is a national conflict of interest. In Japan, politicians will be sent to the Diet representing the entire nation. If you're elected in election, you will be able to represent the whole of nation. But they belong to a particular policy and party, and you belong to certain groups and supported by certain groups, and therefore it is definitely a COI, or conflict of interest. It's that kind of scheme or structure that we have left our destiny to be decided. I think we should realize how stupid we are. And as a constitutional lawyer, constitutional lawyers have been pointing this out for 80 years already. Another point I want to raise that democracy is terrible, is worthless, and deliberative democracy or pluralistic democracy, we've been talking about democracy in such ways, or democratic experimentalism. There has to be some kind of adjective in front of democracy in order to talk about democracy. And democracy without adjective is the same as unlimited populism. Should we feel grateful for democracy? So I'm going to put on my constitutional lawyer hat. Politics, democracy, government are all very important for constitution. In order to run the governmental system, you need to rely on democracy. And therefore, democracy, if democracy is a dead content, it will be a problem for us as constitutional lawyers. And that is why plurality, as a new driving force for governance, I hope it would serve as such. I have high expectations for that. If we could go to the next slide. So the second part of my talk, I want to briefly talk about some of the activities that I do because I am a constitutional lawyer. Apart from teaching law in college, for the sake of a minority, I often write legal briefs. And therefore, I am deeply engaged in litigations. Politics, as I said, is a dead content, and Japanese population is not very interested in politics. We believe that it is almost impossible to change anything through politics because nothing changes. They claim that they will reduce tax before elections, and they will resort back to their original position. This is like a fraud, but a platform that could change the society, which we are finding to be effective, is litigation. Using constitution, overriding the institution has been seen through rulings of higher courts and lower courts. And as you see, this is call for. It's a crowdfunding platform. And this crowdfunding platform is calling for public law litigation. And this is playing a very important role, crucial role in Japan. The politics itself is very quiet, but court is quite active. It's almost like a civic tech, I would say. And this is a screen from Call for. As you can see, there are, as if this is a shopping mall, there are many different cases, litigations. These are my pain points. These are my problems. Please. I would like to raise funds. So you get up in the morning and open call for. You will find many issues, pain points that people are suffering from. And if you align with that feeling, you can give money. Like there's a bar at the bottom of each box, like it says 75% achieved or 54% achieved. You will be able to visualize your commitment on this site, in this site. You've never met these people before. These are people that you've never met, never had conversation with, but we're able to communicate and interact through this homepage and also take action. And the people who are fighting lawsuits are very serious, and therefore I kind of hesitate what I'm about to say. This is kind of gamification. my commitment, your commitment will be visualized, achieve 75% or only 40%, or there are certain cases where it can achieve 150%. Your commitment will be quantified, and this is a litigation, and therefore you could go from first instance to higher courts. If you lose this time, you would pay more the next time. If you win, you would pay more the next time. So you are in solidarity with other people that you don't know of, and that kind of relationship is created in each case. So this is the kind of civic tech that we're seeing, not in democracy, but in the rule of law. And it's becoming very active and vibrant in Japan these days. So to Audrey and Glenn, I have not really a question, but it's a request. In your concept of plurality, how is law positioned in plurality, or courts, lawyers, and judges? How are they positioned in plurality? I have strong interest in that because using tech for consensus, democratic consensus building, creating a very smart platform is very important. But even if you're able to achieve a consensus through sophisticated means, you have to be able to verify that. And laws and constitution has a role in that. How do you capture that in plurality? And I would also appreciate if you could see law and constitution as another way of driving force for plurality. Thank you. That's all from me.
I was just donating to COFAR. Yes, I chose the cause that says people under 18, like 15-year-olds, should have the freedom to support the political campaign of their choice. Because my first work on the World Wide Web, when the browser first came in, was in 1996, when I was 15. I supported my father, who was the spokesperson for one of the presidential candidates in the president's campaign. That was the first year in 96 when we can vote for the president in Taiwan. So in Taiwan, internet and democracy, they come to the same year. And it means that for us, democracy being a floating signifier, as the professor said, a floating signifier means nothing without an adjective, is somewhat imbued with the idea of openness and internet, which is very interesting because openness is also a floating signifier. It also means nothing in particular. And so you can talk about openness, but without something that is described by openness by itself, it doesn't mean much. And so openness and democracy, I think in my own youth, when I was 15, supporting a political campaign on the internet, they gave each us meaning, free from floating signifiers. And so I think that is the role of the legal world in the plurality space. It gives very strong operational meaning to what could be just very abstract signifiers. When we talk, for example, in the US about citizen assemblies. The US, most of the states have no norm of citizen assemblies in the administrative branch. Becomes almost not possible to talk about this in the abstract way. However, if we start saying, oh, it's like a jury system, but for the administration, it's like a jury system, but for the technical safeguards for AI entering society, when we call it alignment assembly and we invoke the idea of a jury, because it is protected by the constitution, by the legal system, people immediately goes to a very operational kind of view. So to me, I think it's both a forcing function to make something abstract into something operational, and by itself, it is also kind of a program code that people can propose updates and upgrades in real time. So it serves both a grounding as well as a updating role in the plurality space. I hope that answered your question.
I would just add that, first of all, as you might have seen in the book, crowdfunding is something we've spent a lot of time on. And I'm very excited about the idea and the example of what you're doing with adding in this aspect of quadratic funding. So if there's a philanthropist who wants to support public interest law if the government wants, instead of just spending on public defenders or public prosecutions, to give a share of the attorney general money, or whatever you would call it here, to actually match citizen petitions. I think this would be a very exciting experiment. So I hope maybe this can be a new business model, actually, for the wonderful work you're doing. The second thing I'd say is we've got a chapter all about bureaucracy, but it's really about law and administration. And adaptive administration, I believe we call it. And the idea there is that a great potential of AI is to allow for greater legal diversity and sort of nuance to coexist with fair enforcement of rules and interoperability between rules. And I think one of the greatest potentials of this regime could be to not require such a rigid modernist interpretation of law, but still allow people to dynamically build new things. So I actually think there's enormous potential for these tools to allow for much more flexible legal systems that are actually more adaptive to more traditional practices that have been overridden by modern bureaucracies. And I think that's a perfect thing to pioneer in Japan, because Japan, of course, is the world's great example of a society that was able to simultaneously modernize and maintain traditions in a way that so little of the rest of the world was. And that we can use these new tools as a way to strengthen that further.
Thank you so much. You both, the replies is very encouraging me to expand my ideas. Thank you for your comment, and thank you for your donation as well. Thank you so much.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you so much. I really wanted to do this in a more interactive way by engaging other people, but time is tight, and so let me move on. Next is Suzuki-kan. Let me call you Suzu-kan. As I mentioned earlier,
Yes. そうです。
that's right. Why is he sitting in the far right? Because the interpreters could get confused if we're sitting next to each other, I thought. So Suzuki-kan, Suzu-kan, is teaching in a university. But before that, he was a politician and was the state minister for MEXT to introduce democracy, and he also deliberative democracy, and he published a book. And Fukuzawa Yukichi sensei, when we say sensei in Keio University, it's only Fukuzawa Yukichi, and so I, by mistake, used the word sensei to someone else earlier. That was a mistake, but he wrote a book called Jukugi no Susume, recommending deliberation. So from that perspective, if you could make some comments. Yes, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I've been looking very much forward to today's discussion. So time is limited, so let me talk about what Suzukan Lab has been doing in terms of digital democracy. We've started this from 1996. My professor, Keio SFC, Kaneko Ikuyo Lab, collaborated with Fujisawa City in Kanagawa Prefecture to launch the electronic conference system. So this started in 1996. In 2000, myself and Kaneko Sensei, inspired by Dewey and Tocqueville, wanted to turn public schools into democratic schools. And so we've published the idea of community school. the community residents will have deliberations, will decide on the direction and guidance of the school, and many people, volunteers, school volunteers will support and collaborate. This was the idea of community school. It was legislated in 2004, and right now there are 30,000 public schools, of which 20,000 schools are now community schools. And more than 10 million people are active as school volunteers. So that's what we're seeing as the fruit of 20 years activity. And Kawabe Kentaro-san and Sato Daigo-san, who I've been working together with, in 2010 launched Yahoo Minna no Seiji, everyone's politics, and Ken-san also supported me in launching the site. And then I became the state minister for MEXT, and I've been, rather than Haverns, I like Arendt. And so I've started the deliberation kakeai, jukugi kakeai, on the website of MEXT. I've launched the deliberation kakeai. And the real in-person deliberation was also conducted 200 times under the hosted by MEXT. And 4,000 times of such deliberation meetings have been held by various schools in 3 years, and also 4,000 more in public halls. So we had these online deliberation sessions. And jukugi, or deliberation, has been positioned as a special activity in the curriculum guideline, and we distributed pamphlets to all the schools in Japan for children and also junior high school students. And after the Great East Japan earthquake, we created the portal to support learning of children. A yacht was presented to schools where yachts were lost, and musical instruments were also sent from schools. A policy contest was held by the Cabinet Secretariat in 2010, and for 200 items of budget requests, we asked for public comment, and it turned out that 360,000 public comments were sent, of which half were from people in their teens and 20 years old. So it turned out that the budget for MEXT was now exceeded that for the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Trade. And the deliberative polling for pension and also for nuclear power, we had that in 2011 and 12. And there was also discussions to lift the ban on online elections, public office, to amend the public office election law. So high school students are now beginning to learn about public philosophy. And looking back on the past 25 years, politics has become closer to us. But if you could go to the next slide. Collaboration, or are we moving to the next slide? Collaboration and coexistence, art of politics, I think, has stepped back. And as we've heard already, politics is now really a dead content. It's become a theater, but it's a dead content. And the normal majority, I think, is kind of running away from politics. So with the normal majority, I want to take back democracy. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. So may I pass the microphone over to Audrey and Glenn for your comments?
Yeah, I think politics, if you treat this as a ritual that is to be performed in a way without knowing much about the actual dynamics or content, then obviously it is like absolute content, as both of you have referred to. And I think the good thing about the idea of using technology to foster a different kind of political movement is to take politics outside of its original mode and put it into the mode. For example, in community notes on X.com and now on YouTube and Facebook as well, there's really a political action going on. You see the same sort of convincing, lobbying, building bridges, making sure that there's common understanding, and so on and so forth, as a normal politician would do. Except, of course, these are not professional politicians, but people who are fans of community notes, a fandom of community notes. So many people say, oh, it's like a jury system, or it's like random selection. It's nothing like that. It is just community note, which is a new place for politics to imbue the spirit into. So I think one of the key challenge today is to think of politics, to remodel it in a way without referring to the original mode, but still in such a way, like the Lagrange point, that you can then exert gravity so that the original practitioners can also see that broad listening really lower the risk. Broad listening really save people's time. And so a lot of the old political mode was made when you have to make a trade-off between the two. So that if you understand more deeply what people mean, there's fewer people who you can understand. If you really want to know what everybody knows, all you have is very shallow understanding. And so by rejecting that trade-off, using community notes-like platforms in newer places, you also exert gravity influence so that the original practitioners of politics can also reimagine politics in such a way that is shown by the pilots and experiments. That's my response. Thank you.
I would just add that I think, you know, the usual way that people think about Japanese politics is that it's sort of a sad sister of European parliamentary democracies. It kind of is a one-party system. There aren't really meaningfully competitive elections. You know, and that's kind of thought of as, well, it's an unfortunate thing because it's a country that's, you know, sort of post-authoritarian, blah, blah, blah. This is the usual discourse. And I think Japan has accepted this because it, you know, for reasonable historical reasons, feels shame on itself or something. But we're at a moment when the world desperately needs to hear of different possibilities. And you look at somewhere like Switzerland, people don't say, well, it doesn't have such a exciting party system. People talk about the local democracies, and they portray this to the world. And the work you've been doing, every time I come to Japan, I hear a new, amazing story about the vibrancy of alternative forms of democracy. And I hope that the leaders of this country will step back a little bit from just being ashamed of the fact that they come from some party that's not so competitive and whatever, and instead tell these stories and make them more central to the way the country runs things, so that you can have a story to tell about how Japan is a future, not just a you know, less effective version of the past. Because I think that's something the world desperately needs now. The disillusionment is out there, and yes, there's this ferment around all this stuff, but you know, there's limits to how much Taiwan can tell the story because it's excluded from many forums in the world. And you need the scale of a country like Japan to tell that. So I hope that we'll have the chance through this book and other things to lift up the amazing work you've done and make it more central to the story Japan tells to the world. So thank you for all your amazing work.
はい、どうもありがとうございます。Thank you very much. And tell us what we would like to discuss about how to use AI to decrease the barrier to the normal majority. And yeah, thank you very much.
We read in the book about some early experiments of quadratic funding in the Gitcoin experiment in the Web3 communities. Recently, I think both Glenn and I are involved with a new experiment with the Gitcoin community called the Deep Governance, or DeepGov. And it's associated with this idea of deep funding. The idea here, very simply put, is that normal people, when they vote for quadratic funding, Usually, we just fund the projects that are very good at communicating or very much serving the everyday people or much more like 2C, like citizen-facing and so on. There's a fundamental tension between the deep work, the deep tech required to serve many future ideas versus the very shallow ideas that kind of work just for tomorrow, but a lot of people can see it in a kind of shallow but broad way, and these kind of projects usually get a lot more funding than the deep funding. But it takes a lot of time to understand how the deep project supports, like fundamental science supports the technologies and so on. So the idea now is that AI agents can look at the dependencies and the ideas of people's contribution here and its effective outcome, and then finally the impact. And that was too much for humans and individual voters to understand. However, the individual voters can, through ideas like Polis, to write a model specification, a specification for an AI agent that can then follow these common ideas that people have written, sometimes called constitutional AI, which is a very strange way of using the word constitution, so I prefer model spec. People write a spec together, and then the AI politician just execute this spec. And then the AI politician offers a prescription, a program that people can see and audit and so on, that actually runs this budget allocation within that I would say, overlapping jurisdiction of the Web3 space. And so I think things like this preserve the two important properties that we want out of politicians. One is accountability. If they make such a decision in a way that's actually not conforming to the model spec, the inspection is very easy. So you can very easily say if this AI politician is not doing the thing it promised to do because it produces human legible text. And the other thing is the diversity in philosophies. So you can have AI agents that act on a utilitarian way, a communitarian way, and so on and so forth, so that expose people to different ideas of ethics instead of just putting everybody in the same strata as maximizing utilitarian in the Bentham tradition, which was kind of the default mode, and that leads to all sorts of negative externalities, as we all know. So I think I took some time to describe this in detail, but I think this kind of AI agent that preserves the political accountability and diversity is one of the very interesting features that we will be sure to include in the next version of Plurality.
Yeah, I would give another example, which is when we think about things like citizens' assemblies, the idea of the assembly is that you want a very diverse set of people discussing. And if you think about diversity in a very narrow way, we often balance on various demographic characteristics or things like this. But there's a more ambitious way we could think about it. And it actually relates to the way that a lot of companies do meetings. So companies almost never do meetings by randomly selecting a set of people from the company to have a meeting. And you might say that's bad, they should be more deliberative, but I would actually say there's something really good, which is that usually when you're setting up a meeting in a company, you choose a stakeholder that represents all the different relevant constituencies. You don't just randomly select people. And you usually also try to select a set of people who can get along with each other well enough. And maybe we could optimize for something more like this when we do citizens' assemblies. Rather than saying we randomly select and balance a little bit, we could actually try to maximize the diversity of the set of people participating by doing a set-based optimization. That's something that technology could let us do that's much more sophisticated. And maybe even if we're having multiple assemblies on the topic, you know, once you take diversity in a rich sense, even a maximally diverse set will never cover all the different combinations that could come out in those conversations. So we could actually, rather than just having a bunch of redundant random samples that all come to the same conclusion, actually have assemblies that come to very different conclusions. And that's great, because they all get different insights that we can then bring together in policymaking. So I think we can be much more ambitious using these tools in terms of what we aspire to get out of these things, rather than just say, let's just do what Athens did. No, we have much more capacity than Athens had now. We can use these tools to have really great deliberations that give fresh new insights, and we can combine them together. And I think that's the possibility with these tools.
One very quick addendum. I think very concretely, the technology we have this year compared to Athens or even just 2 years ago is the ability to aggregate qualitative ideas with language models without hallucinations. So this is also something Colin of Polis has been working on. Using open source models such as Gemma, QAT, anyone can verify running on their own laptop this kind of aggregation of qualitative preferences, ideas, opinions, and so on. And with this, that means that it is no longer a bug that we have too many different value traditions and ethics or whatever in our deliberations, rather maximizing that still reliably produces the kind of actionable executive summaries. And I think that is very exciting, and which is why I also contribute to a new project called Frankly at frankly.org, which is like the Stanford deliberative polling platform, but open source. And we implement also their multilingual capability, contribution welcome for the Japanese translation, as well as this maximizing diversity in the set of deliberators that Glenn just talked about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. スーカンさんがこれからちょっと AI パワードポリティシャンとしてま
So Suzukan-san might re-emerge as an AI-powered politician. I think this conversation gave us some hope. Now I want to move to Yasuda-san's part, but we only got 2 questions on Slido at this moment. So if you could vote and also enter your questions, that's very much appreciated. So let's move on to Yasuda-san's part.
Yasuda-san is an economist. So matching theory and game theory and so on, he has been studying that. And 15 years ago, he wrote a book about the system to choose your own school, and I was somewhat engaged there as well. So in designing a new social systems using economic theory, he has been presenting some ideas. Actually, he used to have spend some time with Glenn. So thank you very much. This is Yasuda speaking of Osaka University once again. So here at Keio University, I have another title that is relevant to this university. 5 years ago, to leverage economics design for business purposes, I started a company with the same name. And 2 professors from Keio University, Sakai-san, Hoshino-san, and Imai practitioner, 4 of us established this company. So yesterday, for today's report, I put together some presentation materials. What took the most was discovering this picture on the left-hand side. I spent so much time finding this photo with Glenn. So in advance, I didn't get an approval from Glenn that I was going to show this picture. This is my days during 2008. After the PhD award ceremony, I took this picture with him. So in fall of 2007, I had already had a PhD, but I couldn't attend the ceremony. So in the following year, I attended. In 2009, Glenn was a predictorian of the economics department, and the reason why this is 2008 was because he completed his PhD within a year. I took 5 years, Glenn only 1 year. So we both have a PhD from the same university. So maybe my PhD is different from his, given we spend so much different time. So that is one message for you to take away. So it's not just that we studied economics from the same university, completing a PhD. We have some overlapping expertise as well as initiatives so far. So we'd like to share with you our initiatives so far. So unlike other panelists, I'd like to talk about economics as well, what I thought about from plurality and so on. So first and foremost, with Glenn, apart from university, what sort of contact points did I have with him? So his previous book called Radical Markets, which has been translated into Japanese, I did supervision for the translation and provided a commentary. The reason why I did this was because my expertise is somewhat close to his, so game theory, and also industry organization, oligopoly theory, mechanism design, political economics, social choice. These are my expertise areas, and I've been using economics theory to study all these fields. The reason why I study these areas is manifold, but earlier Komamura-san said that politics is dead, it is a dead content. And nowadays, capitalism is dead contents. So when you go to a bookstore and so on, you see books with the titles about the crisis about capitalism, and there has to be alternative systems and so forth. There are many books. I, for one, I believe that the current economic and capitalist system do carry some problems and issues. But discourse and books that are getting people's attention are pointing out the problems of economy and capitalism, but they don't have enough alternatives. It is like illusionist type sort of a discourse they are offering. So leveraging my own expertise, I have been exploring as to how we can deal with these issues of capitalism as well as economy, or at least alleviate such issues. And when I started doing that, this radical markets was a great starting point. So in terms of economic theories, there have been many failures and problems. And these are not included as market failures. There is an economic inequality as well, and mainstream economists haven't been working on this issue. So not just criticizing such aspects, but also we already know game theory. We can use alternative theoretical framework to address these issues. I believe that this is very useful. Having said that, maybe we are missing something very important. I was somewhat uncomfortable. So as I was feeling such discomfort, I came across this NHK program called The Capitalism of Greed. This is about capitalism and economy. So this was a TV program which was trying to identify some fundamental issues, and I was invited as a navigator. So this program continued for some time, and I was a navigator for 3 to 4 years. And this is Columbia University Dr. Stiglitz, and I visited figures like him and then asked about problems of capitalism and so on from authoritative figures from various fields. As an aside, I asked Glenn to appear in this program once, and we did the shooting in New York. Thank you very much. So I had such a sense of discomfort. I participated in this TV program, and I had contacts with other researchers and so on outside of my university, but I wanted to use some specialized framework. And this is something Kensa introduced to me, a blog article by Glenn. This is about radical markets, but this was more of a critical review that Glenn wrote, and there was this keyword, alone. So this is very difficult for us to translate this word alone. So atomistic liberalism and objectivist life epistemology. So I think this is just a gibberish for many of you. But on top of the game theory and economics tools are respecting individuals' incentives and decision making. So this is related to Marxist economics, and sociologists and political scientists tend to offer a different approach. But because there is too much focus on individualism, so solidarity with the society doesn't really exist. It is just a rational decision-making by individuals to transform a society. So many systems that we are trying to offer tend to set some goals, and then some top-down approach will be taken. This is not a bottom-up approach, a plurality approach. This is more of a top-down approach. And rightly, this Glenn's article or alone, the keyword alone, has pointed this issue out. So I was feeling alone, but knowing alone, I felt that I was being told that I was alone. So I think my joke is not really working here, both in Japanese or English. But how can I travel to plurality from alone? So I don't want to abandon my expertise, so I want to still use gaming theory and so on. And without being alone, I was hoping to explore some ideas contributing to plurality. So there are two things I want to share with you. The first one is a market without money. So in the world without money, how can we realize the trading and transactions that are market-like? Of course, you can trade the goods for other goods. That used to be one approach. But this is very difficult to overcome the overlapping of greed. During 1970s, top dwelling cycle algorithm was advocated, which led to Nobel Prize. So this wisdom or research area has been well known. So chapter 4-3 of this book talks about this TTC, top trading cycles. So for example, organ donation exchange mechanism is an example that is used here to save people's lives. This is a societal design which leverages this. But apart from that, in a normal market, if you want to trade goods and money, it is not really used. The reason why this is not used is because recently at UC Berkeley, together with Yujiro Kamada, we identified some reasons. Perhaps it is because desirable trading cycles can be realized. For example, many people get together, person A gives this to person B, and then person B to person C, and so on. So you can have this kind of a large trading cycle. TTC is a useful system in this regard. But then after you establish this system, you don't want to trade anymore, or the item is broken, then all the trading connected to this cycle cannot be realized. All of them will fail. So all buyers are sellers as well. So if one person disappears, then all the trading cycles will be destroyed. But in the market, it is between goods and money. So even if one transaction doesn't come through, it is still possible to maintain the market function. And I believe that the theorists have not been focusing on this issue because in terms of a theory, this kind of a dropout shouldn't happen. But we are focusing on a research in regards to this dropout. So I would like to publish this in the near future. So without using money, how can we leverage the market function? That is one idea. The second one is voting without votes, as you can see on the slide. So without using the number of votes or vote count, collective decision making may be possible. So in this book, Graham and others came up with a quadratic voting, and a lot of explanation is offered here, slightly different from system. Balensky and Raraki, in their book in 2010, they came up with this majority judgment system. So this is an extension of the approval voting system. So all the voters can express their strengths of their preference of certain candidates. So you can use a number of tokens for candidates. So it's not one person, one vote. So each candidate collects a number of votes, and then the ultimate decision or judgment will be represented in some absolute number. But if it's a majority judgment, for example, each candidate in 4 stages or layers, how much a distribution of votes they get, you can see that, and then you can choose an option, and median voting will be focused upon, because a median number, if that's the greatest, then it should be most positive. And then what about the options above the median or below the median, how many votes have been collected? You tend to pay attention to these aspects. But what's important is not just showing the number of votes for each option. I think this majority voting system is actually quite well made, because collective decision making is enabled, while the outcome or results are not shown with priorities or ranking. So the first one, market without money, and voting without votes. What is the common between the two? Both of them, in the first dimension, values, good or bad, is not indicated, because if it's goods or services, you can see the price tag attached to it. But people's preference about items and goods tend to be very diverse. But some numbers are just given. For example, wage number is absolute in a way, so you can see who's earning more money than who. So if such first dimension results are indicated, members in the same group can tell who's better than others in a way. So there is a comparability between yourself and other people. Then it is difficult for people to collaborate. So my question is that when considering a plurality in this book as well, it is mentioned that comparable numbers, if they are too much simplified with the first dimension absolute numbers, it goes against the spirit of a plurality, perhaps. But at the same time, when a collective decision is made, sometimes a comparison is necessary. So how should we deal with this kind of a trade-off situation? I believe that that is one area where people studying economics can contribute, perhaps.
Your comments on this and agenda.
It's always great to exchange with a very, very old friend who who I've known much longer than anyone on this stage and many people in my life. You know, I think I have a little bit of a difference from a lot of the market design literature that maybe I could articulate just to show the direction that I'd love to see things go. I think there is a tendency to want to put what I think are a little bit artificial constraints on markets and try to solve the problem, rather than to like directly model what I think are kind of actually pretty obvious reasons why those constraints exist. And the reason is that once you model those things, we have absolutely no clue about what would be anything like an optimal system. And I think we should embrace that. I think that's great, because that means there's enormous potential to improve and to be creative. But because economics is very into like mathematical optimization, it is terrified to be in the dark. But I think we should be thrilled to be in the dark. When you're in the dark, you're like physics, you're like technology. You can do so much that's so creative. And I think a lot of the market design literature has gone down the direction of just taking these tiny little constraints so that we can get an optimal solution and we get some things just basically the same thing we're already doing, but just slightly different. And I hope we can get past that. So let me try to just briefly describe what I would imagine. You know, the way I think about the world is that most goods are shared. I live on a lake, and sure, you could chop up that lake, and we could build, hot tubs and swimming pools on it. But I love my lake. But I share it with everyone around me. It's a common good. My community that I live in is a common good. The school that my children go to is a common good. Almost everything is common goods. And once you have common goods and supermodularity, increasing returns, all these things economists don't like to have in models, you very quickly see that the reason that you don't want to have money is that it's just not even remotely an optimal thing in that context. Just in basic economic theory. I'm not talking about any like, oh, that we can't have money, or nothing weird like that. You just try to write down the simplest general equilibrium model, and it will tell you that an economy based on money will not give you an optimal outcome. Those are things that everybody has daily experience of. Everyone knows that those exist. And we know that if you throw economic theory at it, it will say, don't have a money economy in that context. So now the frustrating thing is it sounds really hard to deal with. Yes, it's complex. But like, why don't we dive into that complexity and think about institutions that might do something in that context, rather than just take a standard thing and then say, well, there's this constraint, so we can't use this. So like, I really want to confront the problem in all its richness, and then think of things that might be some kind of approximate solution there. So I guess that's the direction that I would push us in a little bit.
So 今グレンからパブリックグッズ公共
So Glenn just talked about a public goods or kokyozai in Japanese. To create a public goods, what sometimes happens as a problem is a free rider issue. To prevent free riders, one approach is that in the world of a loan, we can design incentives. That is one approach. Another approach is that we come up with some kind of mutually beneficial ways of doing things, altruism, and then we can come up with new issues because you want to benefit other people through the spirit of altruist, that type of idea. I believe that this is a neglected area for economists so far, but other fields of social scientists have been paying attention all the time, so I believe that collaboration shouldn't happen within the sphere of economics only. We can open the area and we can get some important insights from this loan concept and concepts associated with pluralism. We can perhaps leverage them. So beyond academic borders, I feel that collaboration is now emerging. Well, thank you very much. So in today's session, I believe that we've had some excellent discussions. Komamura sensei offered a very good idea. like each of us are presenting 1 or 2 pages only, and then the conversation will start itself. And now we will start a Q&A session. So from the audience, we'd like to take one question from Slido. We also have one question. And if you have a question from the venue, please come next to me. Maybe I've raised the bar too high. Please raise your hand. No?
No questions? Oh, I see a hand. Should we bring the microphone over?
Rather than my English, let me speak in Japanese since there are interpreters and many Japanese in the audience. Plurality, especially how do we accept diversity in the society and make use of the diversity in order to make our societies better? Sorry, I'm nervous and words aren't coming out this smoothly, but it applies to society, but it also applies in individuals, because there are diverse individuals within one individual, depending on the context. So in the interaction, how do you recognize your own diversity and how do you change your diversity? And as an extension, maybe the society will also become different. So as one constituent of society, there's the individual which is also diverse. And if there is a small democracy within one individual, how do we recognize that small democracy in the individual and change that in order to extend that to transform the society? Wonderful question. Thank you. Audrey?
That's a great question. I'm non-binary, not just in gender, but in everything, political affiliation, religion, spirituality, you name it. And part of this non-binariness is to recognize that instead of saying, okay, half of the world is the same as me, the other half is the other. That's the position of indifference. Rather, one can say, I share experience with these people some of the time. I share some other experience with these other people some of the time. And so through like the Lagrange point again of shared experiences, one create internally what some call a coherent pluralism, meaning that instead of being split internally between the spiritual self, professional self, business self, academic self, so on and so forth, one look at the shared common experiences between these different contexts. These contexts, of course, are not completely commensurable or portable. What's rigorous in academia is different in law or in journalism and so on. On the other hand, there's a lot of overlap as well. So a lot of shared experiences. And so to me, I think in a personal level, the easiest thing to practice plurality is to be aware that one have many shared experiences that one do not need to go to a stereotype for. I can go through one experience without calling myself a populist or something like that. And I can go through another adjacent but different experience without calling myself a anti-populist or something like that. And so to learn to cohere between those sub-aspects of oneself also makes oneself a potent bridge so that you can speak to the values across all these communities in a way that makes sense to both communities. The more we practice this, the more coherent pluralism we build in the world. And so in a recent paper Glenn and I co-wrote called Pro-Social Media, we try to work out the mathematics to change the social media feed so that it maximizes this kind of internal coherent pluralism. I hope that somewhat answers your question.
ありがとうございます。よろしいですかね。
Thank you very much. Any other question from the audience here in person?
はい。
ありがとうございます。僕も
Thank you. Kind of related to the earlier question, and this is a personal, out of personal interest, my sets of values when it comes to how I look at things. How was that nurtured over the years? What brought me to my set of values? To think of that and going through an experience that would change those sets of values, you'll be able to imagine what happened to others. And I was able to change because there was a certain timing or some kind of connection that made me change my sets of values. So I was been thinking that way. A shared common experience. If we have more of that, you might be able to be more have more imagination, be able to connect with others. But if you don't go through that experience, or a generation of people who did not go through that experience, how can you connect with others? And if you don't have a shared, connected experience, if you have a lack of that, how can you connect people to plurality in a nameraka or smooth way? If I could get some suggestions for that, that I would very much appreciate. Because people going forward, I'm assuming that people will have more such experiences, but there will be a generation of people who did not go through such experience. And we have a lot of those people. And we need to collaborate with such a generation. Otherwise, we might not be able to connect well. Glenn, maybe?
Well, I'd say, the beautiful thing about a network is that everyone being 6 degrees of separation from each other doesn't depend on everyone having a high degree. It can happen through a small number of people having high degree and most people having low degree, or everyone having a medium degree but not being too correlated with who they're around. And that seems to be the world we're in, and even more the world we're going to. And I think that if you're one of those people with relatively high degree, you often feel a sense of internal division because there are many different conflicting things that you are loyal to. Personally, I'm an American, I'm a German, and I have Taiwanese permanent residence. And there are, especially recently, many distinctions between those loyalties that I have. And that's a challenge. But it's also an opportunity for leadership. Because if you can resolve those conflicts internally and live with yourself and sleep at night, maybe you also offer a way for other people to do that and for the social conflicts that arise to be resolved. So I think that there are, people who are very connected to their communities and also have these other connections. And there's the chance for those with that less divided loyalty to connect to the broader world through those people with more divided, and for those people with more divided to harness that internal conflict as a chance for leadership at the same time. And I guess maybe that's what it kind of feels like to be a network or something like that.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you so much for that.
じゃあちょっとスライドから一つ質問を。
So let's take one question from Slido to conclude the session. So let's choose the question that is the most popular. So people who are joining this kind of a meeting and people who have given up on tech and politics, there is a great deal of a division between the two groups. So the first group of people in this room tend to stay within their own community. There is this silo situation, and then the latter half of the people say that they're in a way like woke, and then the second group of the people are considered as information illiterates in a way from the first group. How can we restore respect for each other? So people who are in this room and those who don't come to this kind of forum, how can we sort of overcome the gap between the two communities? Anyone?
In Milaikan, the Museum for the Future, and they seem to do an excellent job in translating the meetings in top-ended academic institutions such as this one, including like quantum physics and space and all the very future-oriented speculative design into things that I have seen very young people, even teenagers or even people more junior than teenagers, can just put on a earphone and play some DJ and learn about quantum mechanics. So I think it's not a given that the academic community cannot reach out, or that the people only say, oh, it's too high-minded. I think it's mostly a point of design and art, which is why the plurality movement always, from its very beginning, included in a very strong art and design way. We need both the art in the Black Mirror style of telling us like why not to go there, but we also need a design in such a way like Miraikan that tells like if we want to go here, what are the roots of going there? And so both the art and the design are needed. And I think the more we work into these art and design spaces, the less that these two communities, again, build a wall of indifference with each other.
Thank you. 僕はなんていうかな、こういう分断を
Well, thank you very much to address this kind of a division. I don't know if this is the right solution, but I tend to take on a road trip so that I can come across people that I don't normally come across. So if each community can have such an opportunity empowered by technology, I think that will be a very positive future. Now, we have used up all the time, so I'm very sorry but we have to conclude this session now. So I hope that this session will lead to new kind of a collaboration. I hope that it will catalyze a new collaboration. But I wanted to turn to each of the panelists for concluding parting thought. But we have used up all our time. So in the following sessions, Glenn and Audrey will be joining as well. So I hope that you will stay with us to enjoy those future sessions. Thank you.